Welcome to Semi-Retired with your hosts, Dave Farrant and
Richard Bonomo.
Hey, Richard, how you doing this week?
I'm doing good. I'm doing okay.
Still hot, isn't it?
Is that a conspiracy?
Let's find out. I mean, I'm glad you brought up the word conspiracy because this week we're going to take a deep dive, well, semi-deep.
Like everything we do, it's
like
semi-deep.
Everything is semi, that's right, into some of the more popular conspiracy theories of the last 50, 60 years or so, and just see where that takes us, because there's some great material there. So we thought we'd start off with, one that I've been aware of since I was maybe 12, 13 years old, and that's the assassination of John F. Kennedy back on November 22nd, 1963. And Richard, do you want to get us rolling on that topipic?
So I think the big conspiracy is that JFK was assassinated by Marilyn Monroe.
Oh.
Wait, hold on. Does that work out?
That's not bad. That's good.
There you go.
She always looked guilty to me.
After her death. Yeah, so this is like they call this the granddaddy of all the conspiracy theories, right?
Oh, is that true?
Well,
that's
I picked that up somewhere.
Yeah.
It's the big one, the one that everybody refers back to.
Yeah.
Everything goes back. Oh, obviously there are older conspiracies than that. Some we'll touch a little later. JFK happened 7 or 8 months before I was born, so I don't obviously remember it. You were around, Dave. Do you remember that?
No,
at 2?
I don't. I know where I was because my parents have told me, but I have no memory. No,
okay, where were you?
My parents and I were living in a trailer in Trenton near the Air Force Base because my father was on temporarily attached to the Air Force Base. He worked for Canadair back then, and so I was in a trailer. I recall my mother blowing her eyebrows off when she set fire to the propane gas stove. That I remember.
Was that a reaction to the assassination?
It could have been. It could have. Yeah, the news could have distracted her.
Historical.
Sorry, Mom.
Hysterical madness.
You know what happened.
Yeah. So that's the big one. The famous assassination in Dallas, the motorcade going on. We've all seen the low-res footage of the Zapruder, is that his name?
Adrian Zapruder, yeah.
The Zapruder film. You know, it's odd. I was doing a little research on this. He only filmed 26 seconds.
Oh, is that true?
Yeah. Who buys a video camera? And it was a high-end video camera at the time. It was like top of the line. And who only films 28 seconds?
Adrian Zapruder, it seems, right?
Maybe we were a little more frugal with our film back then. Today, we would have had everything, right? There'd be selfies, and in the background, you'd be seeing the motorcade go by as someone's talking about the latest diet fad or something.
Oh, yeah, there'd have been 6,000 different views, right?
And most of them, no one realizing that there's assassination happening behind them.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a whole thing where he was, he wasn't sure he was going to go out because it was going to rain, but then his secretary or something told him, you should bring your camera, go back and get it. It's like, it's really murky and weird. Assassinated by?
Well, it depends who you listen to, right? I mean, this is what we're driving at.
Exactly, right? So
I think it's not Marilyn Monroe. Let me just say that. I've been thinking about that for the last 3 or 4 minutes. I'm pretty sure it wasn't Marilyn.
And then I just started it's going to start this whole new thing the internet.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. Yeah,
she never actually died.
Yeah,
yeah, exactly. Her hair.
Yeah.
So killed by Lee Harvey Oswald, who then famously was that 2 days later?
Yeah, even a day later was shot by Jack Ruby.
Exactly.
In the basement of the Dallas police headquarters, and so there went the alleged assassin at that point, gone, unable to be examined. So that was problematic.
Yeah. So I guess the big conspiracy, there's a few. There's probably two lines of questioning here is who was responsible and how was it done, I guess, are the two big ones, right?
That's a good way to break it down, I think, yeah.
So as to responsible, everyone.
Well, that's also, it could be that. It could be the greatest group assassination in human history. Because, over the years, it's been suggested that the CIA was involved, suggested that the mob was involved, suggested that it was orchestrated by Lyndon Johnson, who succeeded Kennedy as president. I've heard all kinds of names thrown in there.
George Bush
was
a CIA operative at the time, and apparently had been the day after or something had been called to a meeting allegedly to so he could they could get their story straight as to what they were going to say.
Aha!
But nothing's ever come out of it other than that. And
yeah, that's right, because he went on to be CIA director before he was president, right?
Ford appointed him, I think, in 73.
Something that sounds about right, yeah.
13 years after, 76, right. 76, yeah.
And of course, let's not forget Ted Cruz's father, as accused by Donald Trump.
Really?
He apparently, Trump,
I didn't know that.
Trump said that Cruz Sr., whose name escapes me, was actually in Dealey Plaza at the time of the assassination. Really? Ted took that kind of well at the time. I think he was trying to stay in Donald's good books. But that was, and also I think if I'm not mistaken, I'm not suggesting he was a suspect, but I think Woody Harrelson's father, Woody Harrelson, who played Woody on Cheers,
that's right. I've heard this.
and went on, was actually in Dealey Plaza at the time. It feels like a lot of people were in Dealey Plaza. I was in Dealey Plaza, but like sort of 50 years later, I visited Dealey Plaza.
Can anyone corroborate that it was 50 years later?
No, gotta take my word for it. But given that I was 2.5 at the time of the assassination, I probably couldn't handle the rifle so well. So I went, and what struck me, because let me back this up a bit. The first time I became aware of the Kennedy assassination was through an item we had in our library in high school. We had these things called jackdaw files, and they were focused on particular subjects. Now we're talking the early 70s here. And they tended to be these cardboard fold-out things, so you could kind of, you could take out the jackdaw file, put it on the table in front of you, and do some kind of, it would be like a medieval castle and stuff like that. And they had one for Dealey Plaza. So I remember folding up these little, construction of Dealey Plaza and looking at it. And I think, that's, and this is where the Texas School Book Depository was. And, this is where the shot took, blah, blah, blah. At any rate, of course, over the years, we've seen the Zapruder film and reenactments in Dealey Plaza so much that it was burned into my mind. And the thing that struck me when I got there was, as I turned the corner, it's like I knew where I was. I'd been there in my mind so many times. It was completely familiar. But what most struck me was how small it is. You kind of think it's big, maybe because the event is so big, you think it's big. It's not. It's really quite tiny. And there's a little museum. You can go up in the Texas School Book Depository, and you can go to the window where theoretically, Oswald or whoever aimed the rifle. There's the X on the pavement where Kennedy's car or the motorcade was when he was struck.
They've put an X?
Yeah, they put an X on the...
there's an X marks the spot?
X marks the spot.
Wow.
Yeah, and you can go to the grassy knoll and look through the fence. And I can recall looking at...
And there's an implied X?
No. That was a Coke machine. So yeah, you can really, and you're like, wow, like again, it's also close and intimate. It's hard to believe that such a thing could take place. Well, if the shooter was on the grassy knoll, you feel like everybody would have noticed it. It's like it's right there.
Yeah.
In pictures, you just think, it must be, it's not, it's right there. And I've seen tons of these blown up black and white photographs where somebody's saying, look, we can see a shooter in the shadows, and it's a grainy black and white film. And I'm standing there, and I'm like, wow.
Yeah, there's Umbrella Man. There's
Umbrella Man.
Umbrella Man next to, there's another guy, and then there's the Black Dog Man, and and you look at these blow-ups of the shots, and it's like, what? Is there actually anything there? Anybody who happened to be anywhere near was considered a conspirator or a possible conspirator to the whole assassination thing. It's completely tinfoil hat. I mean, it's crazy. It's or aluminum foil, because we don't make tinfoil anymore.
That's right. It's actually aluminum foil, right?
Yeah.
But tinfoil hat sounds so much better.
It does. And it was probably accurate back then.
Probably it was.
Yeah.
But back to the original question, who did it? Well, I mean, the way it went was the Warren Commission, which was the U.S. government body put together to investigate the assassination and deliver a response. A judgment, a response, had concluded by December, so a month later, before the end of the year, that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone by shooting Kennedy from the rear. That was it.
3 to 4 shots.
3 to 4 shots, yes.
Exactly, in the space of, 7.8 seconds, according to the...
Yeah, 7 seconds in Dallas is one of the books. Yeah, 7 seconds in Dallas.
Yeah.
And that was that. And everything started to fall apart when frames from the Zapruder film were published in Life magazine, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, they outbid CBS.
Yeah, there you go. At some point, and people could see that, hold on a second, if Kennedy was shot from the back and the rear, how is it that his head appears to be thrust back into the left when the fatal shot takes place? Yeah. And people could see that, and they could see the Zapruder film. And I feel like this was 1967, maybe, so 3 years after the assassination, and people began to go, hold on, what we thought was a closed file, Lee Harvey Oswald acting alone, shooting from the back rear, maybe not so, and everything unfolded from there.
Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of speculation as to head movements, and there's been tons and tons of studies by, and I'm holding up air quotes here, experts on movements. Some of it is discounted as soon as the first shot went up, the driver of the car may have slowed down or sped up, which may have caused some jerkiness in the people in the car, obviously. Yep. Kennedy and stuff. And also there's a whole conspiracy that the original footage, because the shot was spotted by someone who offered to have it developed as evidence. They couldn't develop it locally. It had to be sent to Kodak because it was a different type of film from the place. And then from there, three copies were made. So there's the original and 3 copies. Zapruder kept the original and 1 copy, and the other 2 copies, one was given to the, I think it's the FBI. Boards were made for studies and stuff. And one of the people who apparently worked on the boards or whatever at the time, boards with photographs from the stills from that, claims that what you can see now, because the films were donated to the National Archives. The family was paid out compensation, something to the equivalent of $16 million for 26 seconds.
No kidding.
Yeah, it works out to, in today's dollars. In today's dollars, it would be that. Yeah.
Handsome compensation.
Yeah. So he claims that the film that you can see in the National Archives and the boards are missing the spray of the head, and that in the original version of the film he saw, you see a clear spraying shooting out from Kennedy's head.
Well, that's what we see, right? I mean, and it's pretty horrifying.
Well,
I have to
apparently
say.
there's more. There's more.
Even worse than we see.
More
Okay.
so and more obvious. Which of course, he says it's there, and I guess maybe the pattern of the spray or the direction of the spray leads people to believe that shots may have been fired from a different area. But I mean, you go down and you read this stuff. There is so much stuff that can lead you down rabbit holes, and you can lose your mind following all these threads and these possibilities and the possible actors. Was it Cuban militants who were in it? Was it the mafia? Was it whatever? Was it Lyndon Johnson? And there's apparently a letter written by his personal secretary where she was taking memos. He was talking. Kennedy was in his office going on about that he wanted to change things, and she wrote this down verbatim in her diary. When she left the office and published a book about it, saying to the effect of he wants to change the administration and remove certain things, and he's going to need a vice president that is going to follow his ideas. And she says, "Who do you have in mind?" And he mentions the name of the governor of North Carolina, I believe it was, but not Lyndon. And this may be one of the reasons Lyndon was afraid that in 1964 he was going to be dropped from the ticket, and so he helped orchestrate the assassination.
Yeah, I've heard similar. That's it. I mean, Kennedy didn't like Johnson. Him and Robert would refer to Johnson as Colonel Cornpone in their private conversations. So they thought he was kind of a, kind of Texan hick is what it came down to. And there's a story out there somewhere that Lyndon Johnson is reported to have said a day before the assassination, like I think Kennedy was in the background on the TV or something like that. And Lyndon Johnson said out loud, after tomorrow, that's not going to be a problem anymore or something. Now, is that apocryphal? Did that really happen? I don't know. But there's certainly this sense that he, certainly had a motive or, sort of did better in his life and career with John Kennedy out of the way. And there's a whole Bay of Pigs connection there as well, which kind of links back to the Cubans and all that. And there was this, anger with Kennedy for not having supported the invasion, and that the assassination was payback for that, et cetera, et cetera. It's amazing. But, one of the other rabbit holes, you mentioned rabbit hole before, I kind of went, well, it was a rabbit hole at this point, but I bought a book in the early 80s about the Kennedy assassination called Best Evidence. And best evidence is a legal concept, apparently. I'm not a lawyer, in the sense that, when a crime is committed, the best explanation comes from the best evidence. And the best evidence in this case would be John F. Kennedy's body. And this book claims that, because what happened was Kennedy is shot in Dallas. He goes to Parkland Memorial Hospital. Work is done trying to revive him. He dies. He's put on later that afternoon on an Air Force jet to Bethesda, Maryland, where the autopsy is carried out either later that day or the next morning. So the theory in Best Evidence is that, I remember being totally engrossed by this, is that the body, the description of the body made by the autopsy doctors in Bethesda, Maryland, did not match the description of the body as described by the emergency room doctors in Parkland Hospital. So the theory being, or the hypothesis being, that the body was altered on the plane en route from Dallas to Bethesda in the air to make the body conform to the rear and the back shooter. Whereas the injuries on the body, as reported by the doctors in Dallas, indicated a front right grassy knoll, the famous grassy knoll shooter. And that they had played with his skull, played with a tracheotomy incision made in his neck, so that the doctors in Bethesda could claim rightly, yes, it was right, right in from the back or whatever, back and behind. And who was back and behind? Lee Harvey Oswald. So that was I remember being told, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. I wonder if and diagrams and photographs and the whole thing, like, go figure, right?
Wild.
Wild.
I've never heard that fact that they shot him in the plane again. That's going to be my theory. They shot him in the plane.
Yeah, maybe he was still, moving or something. Oh, that's horrible.
Terrible. Yeah. Well, what I found interesting was that in the U.S. has the United States. Well, you have the Warren Commission, and then you also have the what is it? The United States House Select Committee on Assassinations.
Oh yeah, no, I've heard of that. Yeah.
The HUSCA.
It's a select committee, by the way. Yeah.
Select members.
Yeah.
It's crazy that there's an actual committee just for assassinations, and I wonder if it's just domestic or foreign assassinations that they select.
Yeah, what one would hope they wouldn't have much to do.
You would think, yeah, exactly. But the fact that there's an actual committee is kind of crazy.
Yeah, so I mean, the Kennedy assassination reverberates down the decades. Oliver Stone made his film JFK in I'm going to guess 1991, but I'm not sure. And then, of course, that was famously parodied on one of our favorite comedy sitcoms, Seinfeld.
That's right. With the spitting, right? It was who did they accuse?
Oh yeah, it was. It was Keith Hernandez.
Keith Hernandez. That's right.
The baseball player, right? Because it was Newman and Kramer. Go to a baseball game and they abuse or they diss Keith Hernandez, who spits at them.
Yeah, because Elaine is dating Keith Hernandez at that point.
Oh, is she?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah. That's how the whole thing, and they don't want to talk to her because she's dating the.
Oh, that's even better. I'd forgotten that. Right.
With the magic loogie.
Oh, the magic loogie. That's right. Yeah. Which, again, for people not familiar, is referring to the alleged magic trajectory of one of the bullets as it passed through Kennedy and then hit Connolly, the governor of Texas, who's in the front right seat, and apparently performed all these contortions before landing on a stretcher in Dallas. Further contributing to the confusion and the eventual conspiracy theories. And then there's a last thing from me here. There's a YouTuber by the name of Jerry Croth. I think I mentioned him in a previous episode. He's a psych professor, and I think he's associated with the University of Santa Clara. Anyways, he has a YouTube channel. I found him some years ago, and he tackles an interesting variety of subjects. And he's done quite a lot on the Kennedy assassination and new information that's come to light in recent years, including comments made by Howard Hunt. He later famously of Watergate fame, who said something on his deathbed about the Kennedy assassination. And again, there's never anything definitive, but just to suggest that, what are we, 60 years later? Almost 60 years later, 59 years later, it's still a living topic. People aren't settled. Yeah,
it is, and I get part of the issue is the fact that the Zapruder film is so grainy and low res, and that's most of the evidence we have is based on those frames from the shot, right?
Yes.
And allegedly, do we have the full film? Is there parts missing or parts removed to make it look like it really came from Oswald and not from the grassy knoll? And witnesses at the time, anybody who was in the area, there was so many people, it was a big motor. I mean, it's kind of hard to go back. And what's odd is they have sound recordings of the event too, eh? And apparently they can hear the gunshots. And so there's some people say, oh, I was by the grassy knoll and it sounded like it came right behind me. And you got to wonder with echoes and buildings and stuff, how accurate most people's descriptions are,
Well, you raised a very good point there. And I think that's if Adrian Zapruder had left his camera at home that day, it's entirely possible we wouldn't be having this conversation, because the Warren Commission's conclusion that it was Lee Harvey Oswald would have been accepted as fact. There would have been no, I guess, case closed to some extent.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, exactly. I think that really is the key evidence that keeps this thing alive.
Well, maybe we'll find out one day.
So I guess if we're talking Kennedy, we can go to another conspiracy, which is based on one of Kennedy's famous lines. We go to the moon not because it is easy, but because it is hard.
Nice segue, Richard. I like that. Yeah.
So we go right into how to fake a moon landing.
Yeah. So you gonna tell me how to fake a moon landing? It sounds like
I don't know how to fake a moon landing because I looking into the whole moon landing conspiracy that the whole thing was faked. I think one of the big conclusions you get as it would be easier to actually go to the moon than to fake it.
I've heard that before. That's probably true. Yeah.
Today, maybe not. Obviously not, because technology is wild, and the special effects you could fake a Mars landing if you wanted right now. But if you go back to the technology of 1969 to fake the moon landing, it would have been extremely difficult.
I think so.
Yeah.
This one really bothers me because, like you, I'm sure, for me, Apollo was the backdrop to my, but from the ages like 7, 8, 9, 10 or whatever. We used to collect Apollo trading cards with all the astronauts on and the ships and all that. And whenever there were splashdowns, I recall that they would bring a TV set into our classroom. We'd see the splashdown, and we'd see the astronauts being picked out of the water by the Navy helicopters and all that. And when Apollo 11 landed on the moon, I was actually at Cub Camp, Camp Tamaracuda, great name, eh? Somewhere near Ottawa. And again, they set up a TV.
So you would have been 8 then?
Yeah, 8, exactly. Yeah. So they set up a TV, and we all sat there on the ground, and we watched, as I can recall, this moon landing happening. And to this day, I love the story of Apollo. I mean, I almost can't get enough of it. I love any dramatization of it. A couple of years ago, there was a really great film released on one of the streaming services, I guess to commit for the 50th anniversary, where the filmmakers had gone back and had found a whole bunch of large format film, not 35 millimeter negative film, but 70 millimeter negative film, so incredibly high resolution. And when you look at this film, I think it's on Netflix, I'm not sure, you feel like you're looking at obviously images from 1969, but it's as clear as today. It's shockingly clear. Film from that period has a slightly vintage look. This has no vintage look at all, and it's amazing to see. Anyways, not to get off on too much of a tangent, but I have a bit of a resentment about this one. Like why go after Apollo, one of the greatest of mankind's achievements, I think.
And I think the scope of this one is, in terms of the number of people who would have been involved in the conspiracy, is even magnitudes larger than the JFK assassination. When you think of all the people who were at the command mission control, everybody involved in the actual moon landing. I'm going to say actual because it happened, damn it.
Yeah, careful there, Richard. I think you're sliding there.
It's sliding. To maintain a conspiracy for that long with all the overwhelming evidence, it would be impossible to maintain this, not have leakers, not have all kinds of other documentation that comes out that proves that this did not happen.
Well, I agree. And let's face it, it's not just Apollo 11. It's Apollos 12, 13 didn't make it, 14, 15, 16, and 17. So that's what, six moon landings that they had to just keep on faking. Alleged moon landings. They had to keep on faking.
And this is hundreds, if not thousands of people over a space of like 50, 60 years.
Yes.
It's insane that this could be faked. I don't know if you listen to the BBC podcast 13 Minutes to the Moon.
Oh, I've heard about that. Yeah. Oh, I'm going to go back and
really, really excellent. It's about 6 or 7, maybe whatever number of episodes, and they take the 13 minutes because basically 13 minutes to the moon is when you come out of orbit around the moon and to descend.
Oh, the descent is 13 minutes.
It's 13 minutes. Gotcha. Yeah, it doesn't take 13 minutes from here.
I would hope not.
Not yet, anyways, unless the Uber's really going fast.
Yeah.
And in there, they take the actual recordings from Mission Control, and they break down all the language you hear during the moon landing, and it's fascinating. These are all things we've heard. The eagle has landed. All these kind of things, and it's fascinating to hear it. And they take you down. They explain all the technology involved. In one episode we'll talk about the suits, and other episode we'll talk about the software or the computer that was used, the lander. It's fascinating. And then when you get to the final episode, they don't explain anything, and they just run the 13 minutes.
Oh, nice.
And you sit there, and now you know exactly what those bells are, the ding, the words they're saying, contact light. For the longest time, I thought contact light meant that it was light contact to the ground. And it's not. It's the probe hits the moon,
right?
And the contact light comes on in the...
That's understandable.
In the lander.
Yeah.
And it's like, I always thought it was light contact. Like they just touched down lightly. But no, it's not that. So all these words we've heard for most of our lives when listening to moon landing type stuff, it's fascinating to hear. And you're like, how could all this stuff have been faked? It's beyond me.
Yeah. I think, and it's interesting. I think one of the things we're going to dig into here is, why is it people believe conspiracy theories? What's the central motivation here? I think in some cases with JFK and then later with Diana, maybe it's just this unwillingness to believe that somebody so, I guess such a beloved figure they felt they knew so well could be, their life could be snuffed out in a minute. Doesn't make sense. Some of the others, like we'll get to later, I don't want to give away. Maybe it's a slightly more difficult explanation to make. So Apollo, I'm not sure what the motivation was or is for disbelieving it. I should say I saw one hypothesis about this, that the reason that the United States faked the moon landing, and this is from which the conspiracy theories devolve, is that they were so put back on their heels by the Russian successes earlier in the decade, starting with Sputnik in 57, and then I think the first man in orbit, Yuri Gagarin, I think, put an animal up there. They did a spacewalk. And then Kennedy, as you had mentioned earlier, had issued the challenge, and they weren't going to make it. And to avoid losing face in the space race, that they said, okay, we're not going to make it. Apollo 1, pad fired, 3 astronauts died. We'll fake it. And that way we'll be able to get out of this. We'll extricate ourselves from this trap we're in.
Yes, and we've maintained that fakery for the last 60 years.
Yeah, absolutely. With no gaps. And, final thing there, I think for me anyways, I went to the Smithsonian Museum in probably 1991 or something like that. And came in off the mall, walked into the Smithsonian. I was like there to see airplanes and stuff. And there I saw what I thought was a mock-up of an Apollo capsule. It's encased in plastic, as I remember. And it was like a moon rock, I think, and a little thing. Anyway, so I walked up to it. I was like, that's, you're thinking to yourself, man, that's just not very big. You go all the way to the moon. And then I looked at it, and it was actually Apollo 11.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I was like, holy shit. That's actually Apollo 11.
Was it the actual, or was it a reproduction?
It was the actual Apollo 11. They got it. It landed in the ocean. They picked it up, and where else would it be? At the Smithsonian.
Yeah.
I was fascinated. I was like, wow, that's really it. And you can look inside. I think you can get close enough. There's like a barrier, but again, it's covered in a plexiglass sort of shell to protect it. But looking inside, you could see how kind of bolted together it looked. It's not fancy like when you see these SpaceX things, right? It looks really like do it yourself. And there was like dymo tape,
yeah,
used to label some of the switches, eh?
That would have been high tech back then.
It would be exactly, eh? A press to land on moon.
The fact that it's behind a dome, Dave.
Yeah, behind the dome. Yeah,
means we can't. Now, have you ever met anyone who believes the moon landing was faked?
Never met, but I know, I think a good friend of one of my eldest daughter is a doubter of the moon. And I've never been in a position to discuss this, and I would, but haven't yet, sort of thing,
I did. I had a friend who had come from a communist country, let's say. I won't name names, not to out anybody. And they were told their whole childhood that the moon landings had been faked. This is
by the government of this country?
Yeah, exactly.
Can you do a sounds like kind of thing for the country? Like Aruba?
Sounds like Romania.
Sounds like Romania, yeah, right.
Anyways, yeah, and basically their whole childhood they had been grown up being told that the moon landings had been faked.
So I forgive them for that because that's government propaganda. Like, okay, if I was told that, I guess, from the age of 6, whatever, I believe it too. But such wasn't the case.
Yeah. It's like they put a dog in space. Come on. You think the Russians put a dog in space? Dogs can't fly.
Like maybe I detect Marilyn Monroe's hand again here.
The long hand of Marilyn.
Yes.
Yeah. If we're talking moon landings, I guess we need to go to our friends who believe the Earth is flat.
Well, that seems, again, a nice segue.
So, believe it or not, this is not a recent belief. It goes back to the 1800s. There was a British guy who wrote this whole book, and basically the model of the flat Earth is based off of his original diagrams, which looks like something you would make out of clay or papier-mâché with a little flattened Earth on top.
Ooh,
as if a giant Monty Python foot came down and squished the Earth and made it flat. And then they said, oh, this looks good. Let's put a cake dome over it because that makes sense.
Right. And I think, if I'm not mistaken, in the ones I've seen, they show all of the continents laid out flat. Obviously, they're flat. And then the continents are surrounded by a ring of ice, which is, what we refer to as Antarctica. And that's kind of like this edge on a pie. If you imagine like a pie crust, this impenetrable ice wall.
The impenetrable ice wall. Then there's two theories about the ice wall.
Yes.
One is it's the impenetrable ice wall.
Yes.
And the other one is that beyond the ice wall, it's ice to infinity.
Oh, ice to
infinity. So they can't even get their story straight. Yeah. This is a new one I discovered.
Ice to infinity.
Ice to infinity. Exact. Ice baby to
Now,
infinity.
see, this is kind of a retro thing because I recall seeing an image in a textbook growing up, and I think this was a belief of one of the ancient Indian civilizations. So going back a couple of thousand years, and it showed the Earth as a flat dish supported on the backs of two elephants. And that was their idea. They were trying to figure out, like, how does this all work? What's going on? What the elephants were standing on was never made clear. But if you imagine this picture, so I guess this guy in 1860 just dropped the elephants, and we're back to a flat Earth. I don't know if it's floating in space, if it's sitting on something. I don't know.
It depends who you listen to, because some say we're just floating in. There is no space. We're just there. There's nothing.
Okay.
And others believe that we're actually accelerating upwards, and this is what allows for things to fall to the ground because they don't believe gravity exists.
Oh,
but
I
it's
see.
the actual movement of the Earth at the exact same speed that gravity brings things as things fall to Earth.
Oh, I see. So the pie plate or whatever, the dish
Yeah.
is just moving upwards.
Exactly.
In something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
There's a lot of this.
I think so.
There's a lot of this when you look at the flat Earth thing. My favorite is the whole wall of ice, and they like to say, like Game of Thrones, it's a giant wall of ice, Antarctica.
Yeah.
And they say, it's interesting that in 1950, and they named the 7 or 8 countries signed a treaty that there will be no one's allowed to live on Antarctica, no one's allowed to go to Antarctica, and it's to be used only for military purposes, controlled by NASA and the military and these 8-9 countries, whatever it is. And meanwhile, if you do a Google search, there's jobs for people working in Antarctica. You can take a cruise to Antarctica.
Well, I think one of our colleagues
yes, exactly.
went to
multiple times.
Antarctica, right? That's
multiple
Fred, right?
times. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And yet they just quote these things with no actual proof. They love...
Yeah.
This is the thing about the flat earthers, or as I call them, flat
I'm
brain.
detecting a certain amount of what can I call it? Negative vibes coming through you, Richard.
I trademarked the term flat brainers. I don't think anything's happening up there. A lot of the videos you will watch will just throw out buzzwords. They'll just say, oh, it's, why is this happening? Oh, it's refraction, without explaining the science or even using any kind of scientific word with no basis of understanding what actually is going on. And if you call them on it, and then they mock you, basically. And I watched one of the videos. This guy goes on for 2 hours. Beautiful video. It's got all sorts of stuff. He just says all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like one of those. We ran it through the analyzer, sir, and all that came out was hot air. There was no actual science behind it. It's just, and they love saying this. This is their favorite. Do the research, right?
Do your homework, right?
Do your homework. Do the research. And the research they're doing is they're all watching each other's videos.
I see.
There's a common thread throughout the whole thing. They're quoting verbatim
Is that
from
like a
each
type
other.
of circle jerk?
Yeah, no one I want to
Probably
watch
not,
either.
eh? Can I make a brief aside here? You just said about the running it through the analyzer. Wasn't that from Foundation, the Isaac Asimov novel you brought up in an earlier episode where somebody, a diplomat at some sort of conference, galactic conference, talks for 3 days, and they run what he said through a verbal analyzer. It turns out he said nothing.
Exactly.
You basically at some point negated. So the net effect of what he said after 3 days was zero.
Yeah,
I had to share that.
And I believe it turns out it's a stalling technique as they're preparing to invade the Foundation lands, whatever.
Okay, that makes sense. That's right. He's stalling. Sorry. Okay, back on track. Sorry. Yeah.
Well, essentially, if you look at this and you look at the videos countering, there's no way you can rationally believe this to be true. That the Earth is flat. I mean, we have documented proof. We've been to the moon.
Yes.
Sorry. Hoax man. Allegedly.
Allegedly.
If you go up into a plane and on a clear day, you can see the curvature of the Earth.
I've seen it.
Yeah. It's insane that you can't believe it. And they have their fanciful explanations. There's a movie or documentary called Behind the Curve.
Yeah.
Which visits the famous...
It's a great title, by the way.
And they go to the first international flat earthers conference. I believe it was in Raleigh, North Carolina.
Yeah, that sounds right. Sounds right. Yeah.
And there they have all the guys go up on stage and they talk and they do their stuff. It's fascinating to watch this. And one of the guys who makes the presentation, they cut back every so often to him outside of the actual conference, back where he is, and they're doing this experiment where they got this $20,000 gyroscope. They couldn't you couldn't find this thing. It's like a secret gyroscope. So they get this thing and they're holding the gyroscope and they realize, oh, there's movement. The Earth moved. And they go, well, it had to be electromagnetic interference. So they stick it inside some sort of cylinder and it's still showing 15 degrees rotation. I forget if it's per hour, per day, whatever.
Yeah, per hour, that makes sense. Yeah.
And so they're like, well, now we're creating this basalt cylinder. We need to put it in there to eliminate the electromagnetic
Oh my God.
interference that's causing the gyroscope to give the wrong reading.
Yeah,
right?
the reading we don't like.
Exactly. So you cut back to the conference, and there they mentioned that the sky is moving at 15 degrees per hour.
Wow.
So they have definitive proof in their hand that the Earth is rotating. They won't accept it. So they say, no, it's not the Earth, it's the sky that's rotating.
That's a lot of heavy lifting, to get that one to work, don't you think?
And that's the thing. They start at the conclusion and they work their way backwards to evidence to
that's a good
support
point.
the
I think
conclusion.
that's it, right?
Yeah.
I think, conclusion comes with, which is, of course, the opposite to what science is about. Science, you just move forward and then, draw some sort of conclusion. Of course, you're always prepared to revise it as well. I don't do science, but I kind of aware of it kind of thing, So I think the opposite approach.
Oh yeah, and the beautiful experiment, the one where if the Earth is round, man, then how come I can see the buildings over there? They should be below the horizon, right? So they do this whole experiment where they've got this waterway that's very long. Is it 3 kilometers, 3 miles?
Something like that, or 4 miles, whatever. Yeah, something like that.
And they decide they're going to shine a laser from one place to the other, and if they can see the laser, then it shows that the Earth is flat, right? And if they can't see it, it's because the Earth is curved.
Yeah.
And you get to the end of the movie, and they're shining the laser, and the guy's like, "See, I can't see it. The guy goes, "Why don't you raise your arms as high as you can?" And when he raises his arms as high as he can, they see the laser, and they're like, "Oh, that's interesting."
So essentially, their experiment disproved their belief.
Exactly.
Oh,
but yet they still don't believe it.
No.
It's an error of some sort. They'll say it's refraction or electromagnetic interference, or they throw out all the words that, may be related, may not be related, but just to throw them out as buzzwords. It's almost like a politician throwing out words.
I think that's very accurate. Well, this gets to, unlike the John F. Kennedy, and I threw in Diana, the kind of catastrophe that you don't want to believe that such a popular, well-known person, somebody you feel like you've invited into your living room through the TV set has just been, either shot in John F. Kennedy's case or killed in a car accident in Diana's case. This is one where it's a bit tougher to pin down. Like, why would somebody... again, I understand like a lone person becoming convinced of anything, but why flat earthing or earthering or whatever has become so popular? What is it people are...
So popular.
So popular. Well, reasonably so, that they actually have conferences and, I think, if you look, there's like millions of views online. And I think, I have to assume it comes down to the fact that there's just this basic distrust in, I think there's a distrust in authority that certain people have, and also a desire to belong to something and feel, special in a way. That they belong to this club that have kind of figured out the real truth, that they're not like, like the rest of us, like you and I, we're like the sheep, I guess, or the people who and they've got it figured out and makes them kind of special. And there's some psychology there because, I've seen some flat earth documentaries as well, and they seem like rational people, and I think why is that? Why do you think that? The ancients figured out, one of the ways they figured out that the Earth was not flat was that as a ship sailed away from port, it disappeared hull first, and then the masts would disappear last as it went, out of sight. And if a ship was coming into port, the opposite would take place. They'd see the mast, and from that they deduced that, and also looking at the curvature of the Earth on the moon during a lunar eclipse, they went, "Gee whiz, it must be round." In fact, I think it was Aristotle, name dropping here, who decided the Earth was a sphere.
We call him Ari.
Yeah, Ari. Yeah, sorry, Ari.
On our other podcast, we call him Ari.
Ari, baby. Yeah. And also he noticed that the constellations you could see changed as you moved further and further south. So there's evidence kind of, and he was a smart guy. He deduced from that, we must be on a round object. There's other tests they did. So, that's 2,500 years ago.
And if you think of the great era of sailing of the explorers, Magellan and all the guys, they sailed. There are no mentions of the great ice wall that keeps me, or the water falling off the edge, right? There's no mention of the end of the world. They circumnavigated the globe.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah.
Circumnavigated the globe.
That's right. Circumnavigated.
Right?
Yeah.
And I love the theory too that we've all been brainwashed into this because there's globes in every classroom. So now it's a conspiracy of the education system, man. Globism, man. Globes.
Well, I'm glad you brought that up because it's like you ask us why, and in like fashion. To the Apollo conspiracy, Apollo 11 conspiracy, the Apollo program conspiracy, that suggested that the establishment was in too deep, couldn't lose face by backing out. I think the theory here is that they've been teaching us, since about, for the last 500 years, since Copernicus, I think, that Earth revolves around the sun and all the rest of that they don't want to embarrass themselves by backing up now. Yeah. This is the theory. And out of that comes all the globes in the classrooms and all the other stuff. And oh my God.
It's wild. The star and the sun and the moon are the same size.
Yeah, right.
And they're rotating on you see they have little models of these things. It's wild. That's as close as they can get to, I don't want to call it science because the thing rotates. But so does a clock or a clock hands. You can't get a straight answer as to exactly how high the dome is. Is it a dome? What's it made of? The firmament, as they call it. The
firmament, that's right. Yeah.
Firmament, exactly. Yes. There's a word. And when you get into some of these things, you get a lot of religious aspects to this, and that people who believe in the solar system around Earth is to put God far away, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like the sun is far away, everything is far away, so you put God far away, whereas their model puts God close because he built this little thing. This little model that he plays with every so often, spins it around. I don't know. It's odd. There's an odd tie to religious fundamentalism with the flat earthers. Not all of them, but it is there.
See that.
And if you watch some of the videos, you see it alluded to. There's even at the conferences there'll be entire sections mentioning that they mention all the references in the Bible to the flat Earth.
Yeah, well, I think if you're referencing a book that's 2,000 years old. Maybe that's not the best,
That's not science, Dave?
That's not science. Okay. I was watching something the other day, and the person was visiting there's like a Noah's Ark theme park somewhere in the central. I feel like it was Tennessee, but it doesn't really, Kentucky, something like that. So the people who put up the park have built an ark to the same size as was specified in the Bible, whatever that was. So you say, it's a big, all that.
It's a lot of cubits.
A lot of cubits, yeah, many, many cubits, yes. Yeah, mega cubits. And outside of it is signage. So as you walk around the ark and you kind of groove on how big it is and wow, there's signage that is basically telling visitors to the park that, this is where, again, two of each, including dinosaurs. They're saying there were dinosaurs on the ark.
Now they're acknowledging dinosaurs.
They're acknowledging
okay.
Oh, that's a good
But
point.
only pairs.
Only pairs. So a pair of Tyrannosaurus Rexes,
okay.
that would have, they imagine the mess they would have made on an ark sort of thing. How would you even get them onto the ark, right?
Yeah.
While they were eating your face off,
Yeah.
Anyways, I just felt I had to throw that in there. It all seems to be wrapped up. Like when you start to talk about religion, you get off into a whole other thing entirely.
Yeah.
Talk about your conspiracy theory, eh?
It's a little crazy.
It's a little crazy.
And I find it hard to believe that today, with all the evidence we have, that you could look at these things and not scratch your head and going, are they not insane? We have so much evidence. And one of the guys, I think it's Mark Sargent, in his video in Behind the Curve, they mentioned that he at one point he had he says, having no wife or kids, I have a lot of time on my hands.
Oh, well.
Yeah. He mentions that he went through all the conspiracy theories, and he's got they got a little cartoon of all these things. Yeah. And the last one he hit on was the flat Earth, right?
Yeah.
And you see that a lot of the people who are flat earthers, or as I call them, flat brainers, trademark.
I'm feeling that passive aggressive thing again, Richard.
Yes, I never said
active aggressive, really.
Exactly. I never said it'd be neutral. They are also huge proponents of the majority of the other conspiracies. This is not.
Yeah, right.
The only thing they believe in all the other things. A lot of them are anti-vaxxers, anti-maskers, any other anti thing you can throw in there. They tend to. I don't want to say they all are, but they tend to believe in many of the other conspiracies, right? And this is like the biggest conspiracy the world has ever seen, is the fact that we've been told the Earth is round.
Well, yeah, I guess it's not surprising that once you believe one, you believe more, right? Mm-hmm. So flat Earth is it's an interesting group of people.
Exactly. And if you ask them, they'll say, we know about 9/11.
Of course they would. 9/11. Yes, 9/11.
So that's another big conspiracy. Now, do you remember exactly where you were when this happened?
I was in my car. We're in Montreal here. I was on the 40, almost into the Dakari Circle. And my mother called me. I one of my first cell phones at that point, sort of thing. And my mother called me and said, I don't know if you're listening to the news, but a plane hit one of the a big building in New York. And I was like, no, I didn't know that. When I get to work, I'll have to get a look, sort of thing, da-da-da. And the thing I remember thinking was a plane had actually hit, a light plane flew into an apartment building on the Upper East Side or something. So I thought, again, I remember thinking, again? And that really happened. A guy just, I don't know, got lost, got disoriented, flew into an apartment building, whatever, the plane hit the ground, big mess. I thought, geez, again? And I drive into work. And then when I got to work, it was like beginning to, kind of all hell was breaking loose. What about you?
I was working at an ad agency on the 36th floor of a building downtown. And I get a text message or an email from a friend of mine who said, have you heard a plane crashed into the Twin Towers? And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, go check out CNN.
Yeah,
so
right.
I try to load CNN and CNN won't load. It's just nothing's loading. And then I get a message from him again, a second plane hit. And I'm going, and then I look over and I say to the guys, I start saying to my coworkers, it looks like a plane, a couple of planes hit the Twin Towers. And I noticed that the conference room across the hall, all the directors and everybody's rushing into the conference room and they're watching this on TV.
Yeah.
And it's going on. I remember thinking, this is insane. What the hell's going on here? And at that point, it wasn't clear whether it was terrorists or not. And
That's right.
I remember people were freaking out. We're on the 36th floor of a building here. We're like, is this, when they started thinking it might have been an attack. And they said, if anybody's nervous, whatever, you can go home. And I got the hell out of the building. I know It seems silly that this was New York, this is Montreal. At that moment, this act that just came out of the blue, that these guys would willingly fly planes into a tower like that. Because at that point, I think it was starting to become clear that this was not accidental. I got the hell out of there. I got the hell out of there, got home, turned on CNN, and CNN had turned on for free at the time. It was one of those things when major events, some of the bigger news networks will just open their feed up. And I remember sitting there the whole morning watching this.
Yeah, I think in my case, when I got down to the office, so I've got that call from my mother, maybe a half an hour later I'm in the office, which was in Westmount, a little office tower. We didn't have a TV set in the office. We were on the 4th floor, but there was a TV set mounted in the wall between the elevators. So everybody, when I say everybody, we went downstairs, locked the door. And when we got there, the lobby was like full of people, just standing there watching this little TV set, showing the news, right? And we were like, my God, again, it felt like the whole world was coming to an end. We went upstairs. We had a meeting that nobody seemed to be concentrating in. We had like a vendor come in or something. And then I didn't go home early, but I can recall people calling me to see what happened. It just was like, and it was just this weird feeling of like, where are we right now? What's going to happen next? It was very, very powerful. I remember, I feel I remember that.
It was something. I remember I had gotten married on the 25th of August and we had booked a trip to Tahiti. We were going on the dream honeymoon. And because of this, I remember all flights were canceled.
And that's the end of part 1. Next Tuesday, part 2 drops on Semi-Retired. You won't want to miss it.